Chapter 3. Man, a rational being. Mind consciousness, in the primary meaning of the term, designates a state, the state of being conscious or aware of some aspect of reality. In a derivative usage, consciousness designates a faculty, that faculty in man by virtue of which he is able to be conscious or aware of reality. The concept of mind has a narrower application than that of consciousness and is associated specifically with the concept of reason or rational faculty. This association provides the key to its definition and appropriate usage. In varying forms or degrees, consciousness is found in many species of animal, and perhaps all. But the capacity to reason, to perform explicit conceptual integrations, guided by logic, is unique to man. It is his rational or conceptual faculty that constitutes man's distinctive form of consciousness. It is to this form of consciousness that the term mind applies. Mind designates specifically man's consciousness, or form of consciousness, in contradistinction to the forms of consciousness exhibited by lower animals.
The conceptual level of consciousness. It is characteristic of the state of contemporary thought that if one speaks of advocating a biologically oriented or biocentric psychology, the listener is very likely to assume that one is concerned with studying man with his head omitted, i.e., without reference to his mind or his power of conceptual thought. Yet the behavioristic or physicalistic or guillotine approach to man is profoundly anti-biological. In the study of a living species, the biologist is vitally interested in learning the nature of that species' distinctive means of survival, since he recognizes that such information constitutes an indispensable key to the species' behavior. In the case of man, it is clear that his distinctive way of dealing with reality, of maintaining his existence, is through the exercise of his conceptual faculty. All of his unique attainments, scientific knowledge, technological and industrial achievements, art, culture, social institutions, etc., proceed from and are made possible by his ability to think. It is upon his ability to think that his life depends. A biocentric approach, therefore, requires that one grant prime importance to man's conceptual faculty in the study of his behavior. The ultimate source of all man's knowledge is the evidence of reality provided by his senses. Through the stimulation of his various sensory receptors, man receives information which travels to his brain in the form of sensations, primary sensory inputs. These sensory inputs, as such, do not constitute knowledge, they are only the material of knowledge. Man's brain automatically retains and integrates these sensations, thereby forming percepts. Percepts constitute the starting point and base of man's knowledge, the direct awareness of entities, their actions, and their attributes. In our discussion of the nature of living organisms, Chapter 2, we saw that an organism sustains itself physically by taking materials from the environment, reorganizing them and achieving a new integration which converts these materials into the organism's means of survival. We can observe an analogous phenomenon in the process by which a consciousness apprehends reality. Just as integration is the cardinal principle of life, so it is the cardinal principle of knowledge. This principle is operative when, in the brains of men or animals, disparate sensations are automatically retained and integrated, by nature's programming, in effect, in such a way as to produce a perceptual awareness of entities, an awareness which men and animals require for their survival. The principle of integration is central, as we shall see, to the process of concept formation also, except that here the integration is not automatic or programmed by nature. Conceptual integration must be achieved volitionally by man.
It has been an issue of controversy whether or not any animals under man have the ability to rise above the perceptual level and form even primitive concepts. Mortimer J. Adler, in his scholarly work The Difference of Man, the Difference It Makes, presents a comprehensive review and analysis of the evidence and arguments on both sides of the controversy, and argues persuasively for the negative view. In my judgment, he has provided an unanswerable case to support the conclusion that there are no valid grounds for attributing concepts to any animal other than man, that man is truly unique among living species in being the conceptualizing animal. It is extremely doubtful if the lowest forms of conscious organisms are capable even of perceptions. The likeliest hypothesis is that they are capable of receiving and reacting only to disparate, unretained, and unintegrated sensations. The higher forms of conscious life, under man, exhibit the ability of forming not only separate, unconnected percepts, but, in addition, perceptual residues, and perceptual abstractions. Perceptual residues, or perceptual traces, are memory images that function representatively, i.e., in place of sensory stimuli that are no longer themselves operative. Perceptual abstraction refers to the process whereby the animal is able to recognize similarities and differences among sensible particulars, to recognize that a number of sensible particulars are of the same kind and are different from other sensible particulars. This ability accounts for the highest expressions of intelligence that animals under man exhibit, but this ability does not, as such, require or imply the capacity to form concepts, which consists not merely of recognizing that a number of sensible particulars are of the same kind, but of identifying explicitly of what the kind consists. In his illuminating analysis of the idea of perceptual abstractions, Adler writes, for example, when an animal has acquired the disposition to discriminate between triangles and circles, in spite of differences in their size, shape, color, or position, and whether or not they are constituted by continuous lines or dots, that acquired disposition in the animal is the perceptual attainment I have called a perceptual abstraction. This disposition is only operative in the presence of an appropriate sensory stimulus, and never in its absence, i.e., the animal does not exercise its acquired disposition to recognize certain shapes as triangles or certain colors as red when a triangular shape or a red patch is not perceptually present and actually perceived.
What is the nature of the immense intellectual leap that takes place with the development in man of the ability to form concepts? What is the nature of the ascent from the ability to perceive various green-colored objects to the ability to form the concept green? To move from the perception of individual chairs to the concept chair? To move from the perception of individual men to the concept man? To appreciate the nature of the tremendous increase of intellectual power made possible by man's conceptualizing ability, it is necessary to realize the extreme limitations of an exclusively perceptual form of awareness. The number of units that any consciousness, human or animal, can hold in its field of awareness at any given moment is necessarily small. A consciousness that is restricted only to those sensible particulars it can immediately perceive is severely restricted in its ability to accumulate or expand its knowledge. This is the state of all animals under man. The ascent to the conceptual level of consciousness entails two related factors: the ability to categorize numerous particulars into groups or classes, according to a distinguishing characteristics they exhibit in common, and the ability to develop or acquire a system of symbols that represents these various classes, so that a single symbol, held in a man's mind, can stand for an unlimited number of particulars. The method of classification is concept formation. The system of symbols is language. By way of illustration, let us consider one of the first and simplest concepts a child forms, that of chair. The first stage consists of his perceptual recognition that several objects are similar specifically in shape, and are different from all other objects in regard to that characteristic. He is aware of that similarity on a visual nonverbal level, and his mind gropes for some way to hold that awareness in permanent form. The first form in which that awareness is retained is a vague image, an image that omits many of the differences that exist among the chairs that he has perceived, such as, say, color, and retains an approximation of the essential characteristic they have in common. The next stage is when he learns from his elders to call that particular kind of object, that particular class of objects, by the word chair. Now, he has a much firmer form of retaining in his mind that awareness which previously he could capture only as an image. The final step takes place when and if he learns the definition of chair. A definition expresses, explicitly and in words, the essential characteristics of a number of existents, in virtue of which characteristics those existents are differentiated from all other existents and united into a single class. Although the concept involved is a very simple one, we may observe in the above example the essence of the process of concept formation. It consists of the mental act of classifying a number of existents on the basis of a characteristics, an attributes, which is exhibited by those existents and which differentiates them from all other existents. An attribute is an aspect of an entity which can be isolated conceptually for the purpose of identification, but which cannot exist independently of the entity. For example, shape, color, length, weight. In this particular example, the concept was initially symbolized by means of a visual image, But this is not an essential of the concept formation process. It occurs most frequently in children, and in the mind of primitive men. Most concepts are acquired directly in the form of words, without the intermediary stage of an image or other non-linguistic symbol.
Concept formation moves from the apprehension of similarities and differences among existents, entities, attributes, actions, relationships, to an explicit identification of the nature of those similarities and differences. Concept formation involves a process of discrimination and integration. Discrimination entails the mind's power of abstraction, which is the ability to isolate, to distinguish and consider separately, a particular aspect or character of an existent. Integration entails the mind's ability to retain a number of instances of such abstracted concretes, to relate them, to unify them into a single awareness which is represented in consciousness by means of a symbol. This unification, as we have seen, occurs on a primitive level by means of a non-linguistic symbol. On a mature level, as a fully realized concept, it is achieved by means of a precisely defined word. A concept, once formed, refers not merely to the particular concretes which happen to give rise to it, but to all concretes possessing the distinguishing characteristics involved, all concretes of this kind that now exist, ever did exist, or ever will exist. The first level of man's concepts involves the integration into distinct classes of perceptually observable concretes. This level provides the base for the much more complex and far-reaching structure of concepts that rises from it. On the one hand, man proceeds to integrate his narrower concepts into wider concepts, again, by isolating and integrating distinguishing characteristics, and then his wider concepts into still wider concepts. On the other hand, he proceeds to refine his knowledge by subdividing wider concepts into narrower classifications or categories. An example of the first process, the integration of narrower concepts into wider ones, may be observed when man moves from the concepts of chair, table, and bed to the concept furniture, then, by integrating such additional concepts as household goods, then, by integrating such additional concepts as automobile, reaches the still wider concept of manufactured utilitarian objects. An example of the second process, the subdividing of wider concepts into narrower ones, may be observed when man moves from the general concept of tree to the classification of various types of trees, such as oak, birch, maple, etc. As we have noted, the tool that makes it possible for man to retain and designate his concepts is language. Language consists of an organized system of auditory visual symbols by means of which man retains his concepts in firm, precise form. By the use of words, i.e., by means of single units that stand for unlimited numbers of particulars, man's mind is able to hold and work with wide categories of entities, attributes, actions, and relationships, a feat that would not be possible if he had to form images of each concrete subsumed under those categories. Words enable man to deal with such broad, complex phenomena as matter, energy, freedom, justice, which no mind could grasp or hold if it had to visualize all the perceptual concretes these concepts designate. Not only does man need symbols to retain and designate his concepts, but he specifically needs an organized system of linguistic symbols. A random collection of images or other non-linguistic symbols could never permit the exactitude, clarity, and complexity his thinking requires. Entailed in the conceptual method of functioning is the ability to regard concretes as instances or units of the class to which they belong. This is essential to the concept-forming process. In a brilliantly original analysis of the nature of concept formation, Ayn Rand writes, "The ability to regard entities as units is man's distinctive method of cognition." A unit is an existent regarded as a separate member of a group of two or more similar members. A concept is a mental integration of two or more units which are isolated according to a specific characteristic, S, and united by a specific definition. The range of what man can hold in the focus of his conscious awareness at any given moment is limited. The essence of his cognitive power is the ability to reduce a vast amount of information to a minimal number of units. This is the task performed by his conceptual faculty. Point 6. For a detailed epistemological analysis of the nature and formation of concepts, Miss Rand's monograph is strongly recommended. My own brief discussion, above, leans heavily on Miss Rand's monograph, but does not begin to convey the scope of her work in this area.
The process by which sensations are integrated into percepts is automatic. The integration of percepts into concepts is not. It is a volitional process that man must initiate, sustain, and regulate. Chapter 4. Perceptual information is the given, the self-evident. Conceptual knowledge requires a volitionally initiated process of reason. Reason, again quoting Miss Rand, is the faculty that identifies and integrates the material provided by man's senses. To define man as a rational animal is not to imply that he is an animal who invariably functions rationally, but rather to identify the fact that his fundamental distinguishing characteristic, the attribute that essentially differentiates him from other animals, is his ability to reason, to apprehend reality on the conceptual level of consciousness. The hallmark of that ability is his power of propositional speech. One of the most important consequences of man's possession of a conceptual faculty is his power of self-awareness. No other animal is capable of monitoring and reflecting on its own mental operations, of critically evaluating its own mental activity, of deciding that a given process of mental activity is irrational or illogical, inappropriate to the task of apprehending reality, and of altering its subsequent mental operations accordingly. The same conceptual faculty that confers on man a unique stature compels him to confront unique challenges. No other animal is explicitly aware of the issue of life or death that confronts all organisms. No other animal is aware of its own mortality, or has the power to extend its longevity through the acquisition of knowledge. No other animal has the ability, and the responsibility, to weigh its actions in terms of the long-range consequences for its own life. No other animal has the ability, and the responsibility, to think and plan in terms of a lifespan. No other animal has the ability, and responsibility, to continually work at extending its knowledge, thereby raising the level of its existence. No other animal faces such questions as, who am I? How should I seek to live? By what principles should I be guided in my actions? What goals ought I to pursue? What is to be the meaning of my life? What should I seek to make of my own person? The necessity of confronting such issues is essential to the human condition, to everything that is distinctive about man's life. All of man's unique achievements and all of his potential problems are consequences of his possession of the conceptual form of awareness. In the pages that follow, we shall consider some of these consequences.